In the beginning of Marvel Rivals, Doctor Strange was easily the strongest Vanguard in the game, and possibly the strongest character. But after many nerfs, is he still good today? Let's take a look at how the game has changed and if he still fits in. On December 6, 2024, Marvel Rivals officially released publicly on Steam, PS5, and Xbox Series X. Despite an already oversaturated selection of hero shooters, Marvel Rivals had an advantage. The game is made up of heroes and villains players were already familiar with. This allowed Rivals to be successful, even with all the competition. From the selection of characters, Doctor Strange was one of the Vanguards players could choose from. Vanguards are the tank class of Marvel Rivals. They come equipped with a larger health pool, a larger model, and abilities meant to keep themselves and their team alive. On launch, there is not much of a real meta. Players are figuring out which characters are good, which work well together, and how to use them. However, pretty early on, players began to notice how strong Doctor Strange is. He did insane damage up close, has a huge shield to keep himself and his team alive, has his cloak to challenge players on high ground or flying, and of course, has his iconic portal. The portal allows Strange to take him and his entire team to the objective quicker than any other character can. While there are other abilities characters have that can give speed boosts, nothing can cover quite as much distance for the entire team like the portal. For such a strong ability, it has a fitting cooldown of 180 seconds, or 3 minutes. And while I am talking a lot about the portal, and it is an amazing ability, it is far from the only thing that made Doctor Strange so good. Let's take a look at where it all started in Season 0. As mentioned before, he's a powerhouse up close, with a strong shield to keep him and his teammates alive. At maximum charge, Maelstrom of Madness, or his E as I will refer to it as, did an insane 130 damage with no damage fall off. That is more than half of some characters' total health. His E does have a caveat though, that being that if it sits at 100% charge for 3 seconds, he's cursed with anti-heal. Anti-heal makes it so Strange cannot receive any healing. While the anti-heal effect only lasts around 2 seconds, this can be detrimental in a game as quick-paced as Marvel Rivals. On top of that, you can build up your charge quicker than your E will be off of cooldown, which can force you to be anti-healed. This was likely implemented because of the sheer amount of damage Strange could output. Since the more damage you do means the more the meter fills up, it's a way of preventing players from going crazy and doing too much damage with him. Players needed to actually think when they should do a lot of damage and keep in mind the cooldown on their E. While the anti-heal debuff sounds like a big caveat for being able to do so much damage, most proficient Strange players are able to get around the debuff by keeping in mind the cooldown on their E. However, a team-up Strange was given made this a complete non-issue. The Gamma team-up. This was, in my opinion, the strongest team-up ability on launch. The team-up included Strange, Iron Man, and Hulk. Hulk was the anchor of the team-up, meaning the team-up was only active if Hulk was on your team. But if you were playing Hulk without a Strange in Season 0, you were throwing. Remember how I said that the anti-heal debuff was implemented to stop Strange from being able to do as much damage as he wanted to? This team-up completely removed the anti-heal debuff from Strange, effectively making him able to do as much damage as he wanted to. On top of that, his already high damage E multiplier was increased from 1.3 times to 1.4 times his current charge. This meant that he was able to do 140 damage instead of 130 per fully charged E. While that is only a 10 damage difference, when it already does so much damage, it definitely doesn't make it worse. The Gamma team-up was so strong that Hulk was easily one of the top banned heroes in competitive Season 0. Doctor Strange was easily the #1 picked hero across all ranks in competitive during this season, with a 44% pick rate. At Eternity rank, Doctor Strange had about a 73% pick rate, still remaining to be the #1 choice at higher level play. He had almost a 52% win rate, which at Eternity is very good. Generally for competitive games, you should want a character to be around 50% win rate. Around 50%, a character could be considered balanced as they aren't winning too much or too little. While he was far from the character with the top win rate, I attribute this mainly to him being chosen way more often than other characters. Usually in games, when a character has a high pick rate, the win rate goes down because people choose that character just because the character is good, but they end up losing because they don't know how to use that character. Another contributing factor is players would often choose him last second to portal to the objective in a game they were already going to lose. Later in the video, we will still talk about Strange's win rate, but it is not the biggest determining factor of if he is good or not. His pick rate tells the bigger picture, and in this season, it most certainly did. On January 10th, 2025, NetEase released the Season 1 update. This season added Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman. More relevant to Strange, this update also came with a set of balance changes. This patch marked the first of many nerfs Strange would receive in the future. His shield's health regeneration was reduced from 80 health per second to 70 health per second. While this is definitely impactful, meaning Strange can't keep his shield up for as long or as often, it was not the biggest change of the patch for Strange. They also nerfed his E. His E was now given damage fall off, meaning it will deal less damage the farther away you are from Strange. It now only did 70% of the damage it did before at 5 meters away, meaning instead of doing 130 damage without team up, it would only do 91 damage at maximum distance. With team up, it would only do 98 damage at maximum distance. That is a pretty significant change, as the incredible damage Strange does is part of what makes him so strong. That being said, he was still able to be a strong threat up close. For most fights, Strange needs to be up close, landing all his primary's bullets and meleeing between shots, so oftentimes, the damage fall-off nerf could be considered negligible since he prefers fighting up close anyway. I also believe a damage fall-off nerf made the most sense, as hitting people farther away from Strange, who weren't even involved in his fight, was a bit cheesy. Strange's pick rate was a lot lower across all ranks, going from 44% to around 38%, a big drop. That being said, he was still the third most picked character across all ranks. Looking at the stats for Eternity, Strange was easily the number 1 most picked character still. His win rate took a slight hit from about 52% to just about 50%. While that win rate alone could make him seem balanced on paper, the other factors I previously mentioned definitely contributed. Overall, this nerf objectively made Strange worse, but I believe he was still the best Vanguard in the season. On February 21st, 2025, Season 1.5 began. This patch introduced Human Torch and The Thing. With the new season comes a new set of balance changes, and NetEase did not want to let Strange walk free. He received yet another nerf. His base health was taken from 650 to 600. This was about an 8% nerf to his overall health. On top of the shield regen nerf from last patch, this was definitely beginning to hurt his survivability. While on paper, a 50 health reduction does not sound like a lot, imagine if a character like Black Panther or Rocket had 50 more HP. They are already annoying characters to kill, but with 50 more HP, they'd be impossible to take out. That obviously is a bit of an unfair example, since that would be significantly more HP percentage-wise than they have right now, but you get my point. Even small changes to HP make gigantic differences. The developers seem to be aiming to reduce Strange's ability to stay alive in these last 2 patches. They wanted him to still be strong and a damage dealer, but not sticking around too long where there's no counterplay. Strange now had to be a bit more careful where he positioned, as being out of position now can be more easily fatal with less cushion. On top of the health nerf, the Thing's addition meant another character is able to hit him through his shield. While his shield blocks projectiles, it does not block melee attacks, and the Thing uses, well, all melee attacks. Thing's shift ability, which grounds you, also prevented Strange from being able to get away from the Thing easily. When grounded, he cannot use his Cloak of Levitation, meaning he was forced to eat the Thing's punches with no way of escape. He either had to back up, wait out the grounded effect, or pray for his healers to keep him up. Less health, less shield regen to block attacks from other players, and a character that can hit through Strange's shields consistently was not good news for Strange. His win rate and pick rate across all ranks dropped drastically. He was no longer the most picked character in the game. His win rate fell to roughly 48%, and his pick rate fell to just around 24%. In Eternity, his pick rate fell to around 36%, and his win rate fell to just under 50%. It was obvious these last couple patches were not kind to Strange, and players were beginning to feel the changes. Despite all of the nerfs and the addition of the Thing, Strange was still a good character. He was still amongst the top 5 most played characters in Eternity, and there was still value to be had in his kit. If Strange was left here, I think he would have been pretty well balanced given the current state of the game, but NetEase did not seem to agree. On April 11, 2025, NetEase released the patch update for Season 2. This update introduced Emma Frost. This update also introduced a set of balance changes, which, unfortunately for Strange, was very, very, very unkind to him. His damage per projectile was nerfed from 18 damage to 16 damage. Next, His E damage multiplier was nerfed from 1.3 times to 1.2, making him in total only able to deal a maximum of 120 damage per E. Finally, the big one, they removed the Gamma team-up in favor of the team-up with Scarlet Witch, which gives Strange a bonus of 100 HP. This was by far the largest set of nerfs Strange has ever received in a single patch. His overall damage was weakened heavily in favor of making him way more tanky. This update did not make a lot of sense to me. In previous patches, he was made to be slightly less tanky. To nerf both his ways of dealing damage, then buff his health, seemed like they had completely shifted directions in how they were originally trying to change Strange. Needless to say, this change made him way less threatening than ever before. Less damage and no Gamma team-up made him so much worse. On top of everything, Emma Frost's addition made Strange completely irrelevant. Not only was she probably the best tank at the time, every part of her kit seemed to perfectly counter Strange's. Her left click builds up charge when dealing damage to enemies, but also builds up when shooting shields. So, this meant she could farm her left click damage off of his shield the entire time. Those who know about Emma Frost on launch know that her fully charged damage was no joke, and if she were to land her E on Strange when his shield is down, she could deal damage to him through his shield. Even if she did not land her E, her diamond form makes her another melee counter to his shield. She can grab him through it, or just left click him through his shield. Or, she could try to grab him when he tries to fly. Emma Frost just being better in every way on paper, plus her kit being a direct counter to Strange, did not help him in any way. Looking at his stats, across all ranks, Doctor Strange's pick rate went to about 20%, and his win rate all the way down to 48%. In Eternity, Strange's pick rate dropped all the way to 9%, with a 49% win rate. Keep in mind, his pick rate in Eternity last season was 36%. A whole 27% drop in pick rate speaks for itself. By this point, things were looking pretty grim for Doctor Strange. Players started to call him Portal Boy, as his only use to people now was using him to teleport your team to the point during overtime. His days of dominating lobbies as a strong frontline presence were long gone. Doctor Strange was officially on fraud watch, and this is the worst he had ever been in any season or patch. But on April 30th, 2025, a surprise mid-season patch gave Strange a slight buff. His ultimate charge went from 3400 to 3100, meaning it'll charge faster. Was this the change needed to finally put Strange back in the meta? Will this revive the previous best Vanguard in the game, making him dominate at all ranks again? No. Yeah, this change did nothing. It was objectively a buff, but it did not address any of the issues Strange had. Needless to say, this did not do much to help his case at all, and Doctor Strange remained on fraud watch. On May 30th, 2025, NetEase released the patch update for Season 2.5. As usual, balance changers were released alongside the new character of the season, Ultron. After a streak of receiving almost nothing but nerfs, this patch finally broke the cycle. Strange had received two very solid buffs. His primary damage falloff was rescaled from 62.5% to 80% at 20 meters. This means that he could at worst deal 80% of his damage at any range his primary can reach. While he was already decent at fighting flying characters up close, he can now be a bit more threatening at range if his cloak is on cooldown. Not a bad change at all, and very convenient to release at the same time as Ultron, a flying character. The biggest change for Strange in this patch, in my opinion, was the damage falloff for his E being completely removed. He can now do the full 120 damage within 5 meters of himself. While it isn't exactly 130 damage like in Season 0, it is still a huge buff. It makes him a menace up close again, while being able to threaten a lot of damage in close quarters combat. It doesn't completely fix all of Strange's issues, but it is definitely a large step forward from the last patch. Alongside these buffs, Doctor Strange's #1 hater, Emma Frost, was given some much needed nerfs. Most relevant to Strange, her kick and diamond form does slightly less damage, from 50 to 40 without hitting a wall, and 100 to 90 when hitting a wall. Not a ton of damage shaved off, but still leaves Strange with a bit more health when hit by it. Alongside that, her E in diamond form, aka the chokeslam, was given an extra second of cooldown, which, as we've mentioned before, is a lot of time in a fast-paced game like Marvel Rivals. Looking at Strange's usage and pick rates across all ranks, he was sitting at about 49% for win rate and around 20% for pick rate. In Eternity, Strange still wasn't looking much better. His win rate was at 49%, and his pick rate still only sat at 23%. This is a much larger pick rate when compared to last season's 9% pick rate, but he was still not the Sorcerer Supreme that dominated matches in Season 0. On top of that, Emma Frost was still arguably the best Vanguard in the game, and while her tools to counter Strange were weakened, they were definitely still effective. All in all, this was a step forward for Strange from last season. Not nearly the best, but also not the worst season for him. On July 11, 2025, NetEase released the patch update for Season 3. This update added Phoenix to the game and, of course, new balance changes. Surprisingly, for the first time in any new season, Strange received no changes. Not a team-up change, not a nerf, not a buff, nothing. My guess for why this is there were more important characters to change, such as Emma. Emma Frost was clearly still too strong, and there were still numerous complaints about how overpowered she was, how strong her diamond form is, etc. Strange was at a place where he wasn't terrible, but wasn't very good either. So I assume NetEase put him on the back burner until they fixed some more important issues. Despite the Emma nerfs, Strange was still not seeing better results than her. Her pick rate was 20% across all ranks with a 49% win rate. And looking at Eternity, he has an even lower pick rate compared to last season, sitting at about 17%. His win rate climbed slightly, sitting at around 51%, and while Strange's win rate is not completely reliable, it is good to see it go up slightly at higher ranks. Overall, Strange sat at a lukewarm temperature performance this season, and it could have been far worse for him. On August 8th, 2025, the Season 3.5 patch was released. This season introduced Blade, and alongside him, some new changes to all the beloved heroes and villains. Strange had received 2 solid buffs in this update. First, his ammo capacity increased from 8 ammo to 10 ammo. Secondly, his cooldown on his Cloak of Levitation was decreased from 15 seconds to 12 seconds, a whopping 20% decrease to the cooldown. Focusing on the ammo change, more ammo means that Strange needs to reload less often, and having one of the longest reload animations in the game, it is a very welcome change. Having to reload less often means that is more time Strange can spend dealing damage, overall increasing his total damage per second. It seems with this change, NetEase is trying to make Strange more of like a lasting threat, rather than being a scary burst damage dealer like in Season 0. Looking at the Cloak of Levitation change, or his shift ability, this is a pretty nice change to see as well. Having his cooldown be significantly shorter means Strange is able to threaten high ground threats more often. It also means that Strange is a solid choice against the flying meta that had emerged a few seasons ago. Characters like Human Torch, Ultron, and Storm are beginning to be a problem for characters who could not easily reach them. That being said, the flyer meta had pretty much been dead by this point, with significant changes to Torch and Storm in previous patches. Regardless, it was still a welcome change to Strange that makes him all the more versatile should he need to challenge flyers. Across all ranks, his pick rate had increased to 27%, up 20% from last season. And his win rate hovered around 50%, slightly higher than last season's win rate, which was closer to 49%. Looking at Eternity, his pick rate had jumped up to 28%, up from 17% last season, with his win rate hovering at around 49%, down from 51%. As mentioned many times now, I think pick rate tells the bigger picture, which shows that more people were beginning to rely on Strange more than last season after these buffs. Overall, the buffs were pretty valuable to Strange's kit, and his increase in pick rate reflects that. Season 4 launched on September 12th, 2025. The launch of a new season meant a new character, Angela, and some new balance changes. And as usual, there were some changes to Strange. In this patch, Strange received more of a rework, a buff in one department and a nerf in another. Let's look at the nerf first. Strange's base health was taken from 600 HP to 575. Counting in the Anchor team-up bonus that he receives, his total health now sat at 675. We had mentioned in a prior patch how significant an HP nerf could be, and while it does objectively make his survivability worse, it was not nearly as impactful as the last time he received a change like this. First off, he only lost 25 HP in this patch, which is only half as much as he lost in the Season 1.5 patch. Second, after the nerf in Season 1.5, his total health sat at 550. After the Season 4 nerf, his total health sits at 675, a 125 health difference. On top of a large health pool and 800 health shield, Strange's survivability was not harmed that bad at all. This nerf was a trade-off worth making for the buff he received in this patch. Strange's E cooldown was buffed to be reduced to only 6 seconds instead of 8 seconds, a whole 25% reduction in time. This was gigantic. Strange's E was already arguably his strongest ability, being able to deal 120 damage of AoE every 8 seconds. Now, being able to do that 25% more often meant Strange's overall damage per second is increased. He is able to shoot more often with less of a worry of being anti-healed. On paper, this was a huge change to Strange. He has more health than he ever did in seasons when he was considered broken. His E is off of cooldown, meaning higher DPS, and Emma Frost received some more nerfs, meaning she would be less of a dominating presence. You would expect Strange's pick rate to reflect this more suitable environment for him, but for some reason, his pick rate remained relatively stagnant. Looking at his pick rate across all ranks, it went from 27% to 28%. not really a sign of a strong change to him. The data on Rivals Tracker for Eternity in Season 4 seems to be lacking a large sample pool for some reason, so we will be looking at Celestial instead. His pick rate sat at about 32%, which is higher than a majority of the other Vanguards. That being said, Emma and Magneto were still chosen a lot more than him. Why is that? His burst damage, while still being lower in his prime, was still solid, his health was much higher, his portal never received any changes outside of bug fixes, and his cape was on a much shorter cooldown than in his prime as well. So, what is it? The answer is not necessarily one reason, but rather a multitude of factors that contributed. First off, despite being nerfed many times, Emma Frost never quite received the Doctor Strange treatment of nerfs, meaning she had received multiple nerfs, but none really made her unplayable in any season. She was still a better Vanguard overall than Strange. On top of that, I neglected to mention her team up. She had a solid team up with Magneto at the time, allowing Magneto to create a clone of himself that would copy everything that he did. Not even factoring in the team up, Magneto was always just a solid all-around Vanguard. Arguably the best survivability out of any non-dive Vanguard, good consistent damage, and a strong defensive ultimate that can demolish supports mid-ultimate. Despite everything, I believe Strange was finally in a good spot in this season. His damage was still toned down overall compared to his prime, but his health was larger. It seemed like NetEase was done going back and forth between patches to make him deal more damage to less damage to more health to less health. I believe they finally found the sweet spot on where Strange should be in this season. On October 10, 2025, the Season 4.5 patch was released. This patch introduced Daredevil and balance changes per the usual. But Strange was nowhere to be seen in the balance changes. And on November 14, 2025, with the arrival of Gambit, the same would be true. Even a month later, on December 12, 2025, the balance changes that came with Rogue did not change Strange in any way.
Why is this? As mentioned previously, I think they found out how to keep Strange in a somewhat balanced state.
At least for Season 4 and 4.5.
He had already been changed many times leading up to these last 3 patches. On top of that, his pick rate and win rate were healthy. Not too good and not too bad. Looking at Season 4.5, Strange did alright. Across all ranks, Strange had a 27% pick rate with a 50% win rate. And in Eternity, Strange had a 27% pick rate with a 49% win rate. Looking at the official Marvel Rivals website for once, we can see the pick rates in Season 5 for all characters. Across all ranks, Strange had about a 17% pick rate and roughly a 50% win rate.
Looking at Celestial and above, Strange had about a 10% pick rate and a 47% win rate.
While these seem low, you have to consider that Strange was still the 3rd most picked Vanguard in Celestial and above. On top of that, this is the first time I'm using numbers directly from NetEase's website itself. NetEase only shows the usage rates for the season prior to the current one. So for the other usage rates, I was using Rivals Tracker. So why are these numbers different than before? My best guess is that Rivals Tracker, being an unofficial website, simply doesn't collect the same volume of data as the official servers. So while Rivals Tracker's numbers are good for spotting trends, some of the stats we looked at earlier are probably a little skewed due to more limited sample size. Comparatively to the other tanks, these are pretty healthy numbers. It's safe to say that in Season 4.5 and 5, Strange was a pretty decent pick. Looking at Season 5.5, Strange is not terrible right now, but he is currently getting a bit power crept by the other Vanguards. Almost all the other Vanguards around him have been receiving really impactful buffs patch after patch. Also, Emma is still strong and picked often. Is Strange terrible right now? No. Is he a top pick? No. Today is December 23rd, 2025 at the time that I'm recording this. It's pretty difficult to get solid numbers to look at how Strange is doing right now, since the season is still ongoing, but unfortunately, the Portal Boy comments have started to come back. He's not really a great character at the moment, but not the worst. The future of how NetEase decides to change Strange is a bit uncertain now. To be good again, he either needs buffs or to have other characters around him nerfed. But judging on how NetEase balances this game, my guess is he should probably receive a buff soon. Strange is a character that has by far received some of the most changes compared to other characters. I don't think he should ever go back to his dominating presence with the Gamma team up in Season 0, but I also don't think he's in a great spot right now. In the end, despite whether or not he's viable, he is one of the most fun characters to play. He is still a very well designed character. Even if he has to be Portal Boy for a few seasons, I know he will get a chance to shine again soon.